Hi, this is Eric from longboxreview.com. Welcome to the show. And what a very special show it will be because I have a very special guest with me today. I am going old school, recording on Skype with this person, doing a duo podcast, which I haven't done in quite a while. And it's funny because this very person asked me about this on his show. And this person is, of course, George Hanna from the George and Tony Entertainment Show. Welcome, George.
Thank you, Eric. I'm glad to be here. See, I'm not used to being on this side of the microphone.
That's quite all right. George, it's so nice to hear your voice again and talk with you. I had so much fun talking with you on your show not too long ago. That was, remind me, episode 98?
I believe so. I'm looking it up right now. You think I would be Mr. Professional. You know what? I'm making a very good first impression with your listeners right now, aren't I? It only can get better, folks. And you were right. It was episode 98.
So, George, I wanted to just jump right in and talk some things with you. The first of which is some podcasting stuff. So I hope people don't mind that. Then we're going to talk some comics because that's why we're here, right? That's our love, our passion, right?
Yes, it is.
All right, but because I do this little podcast of mine, I'm always curious about why other people podcast. And just I just like to talk shop a little bit. So if you don't mind, let's do that a little bit. So why don't we just start off by having you tell the fine folks out there about the George and Tony Entertainment Show.
Sure. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to do that. We are the George and Tony Entertainment Show, and we are on what is called the Realm Network, spelled RELM. You can find us on iTunes, just like most podcasts out there, under the George and Tony Entertainment Show banner. You can also find us at www.georgeandtony.com. And of course, there's georgeandtony.libsyn.com. You can find us on SoundCloud. We're all over the place, just like you, Eric. We don't have a page like you have, though. We don't have a forum or any sort of way to get in touch with us besides social media like Facebook and Twitter. Our page is on the Shared Realm Network site, and there's no opportunity to leave feedback there. So please, if you want to hit us up on Facebook. We're George and Tony Entertainment on Facebook and George and Tony on Twitter.
Excellent. So, all right, I want to come back to the Realm Network in a little
Sure.
bit, but I kind of want to approach this, I guess, in a more or less from the beginning to the end sort of thing. Well, although there's really no end here. This is just ongoing.
Gosh, I hope not. At least not in the near future.
So what prompted? So give me the origin story for the George and Tony Entertainment Show. Was that your idea? Was it Tony's? Was it somebody else's? And you guys thought, hey, let's do that, or what is it?
It was my idea, and Tony would not disagree with me on this, and I don't think he feels slighted in any way with anything I'm about to tell you. Although when you hear this, you might think, boy, George, that's kind of rough. You're making Tony sound like he was the third or fourth choice at the dance. But to be honest with you, what the deal was, I hit a midlife crisis, probably my second or third midlife crisis within a 1 or 2 or 3 year span. And one of the things that I enjoy a lot is listening to podcasts. I listen to a lot of them, and I like that they afford people the opportunity to simply put their voices and their ideas out there. And it's up to the public to decide whether or not they want to listen to what is this person spewing right now. For instance, there are a lot of pop culture podcasts out there. There are shows like yours about comics. There are shows about politics and sports. You know the deal. Well, I don't have too many things that I could say I know a lot about. I know very little about a lot of things and a lot about very few things.
That sounds very familiar.
I think that's probably the majority of the planet. But one of the things I know a lot about is comics. I'm one of those guys like you who have been reading them for, I'm not sure if we're in the same age group, but I've been reading them for about 4 decades now.
Mm.
And there was a time in there where there might have been a little bit of a gap where I went cold turkey, but then I hopped right back in, and I keep track of things that I don't read via podcasts, which I think is fantastic because You can't read it all. They're very expensive right now, and I use podcasts as a forum to find out what I'm missing out on and maybe learn about new things. That's what I like about your show, actually, because I learn about some new things on your show.
Oh, great. I'm actually providing some service.
You are. I'm a testament to that, and I think your listeners would feel the same way.
I love that phrase that you used. Read via podcast or read by podcast. That was great.
Feel free to use it. I don't have any sort of patent or copyright on that. But here's the thing, Eric. I can't do what you do. I I can't sit by myself and talk in front of a microphone. I just can't do it. In fact, I think I even said on the episode you were on of my show that I admire you for that. I don't know how you or anybody else who does that actually does it. I needed a co-host, at least one. And to be honest with you, I originally thought of it as a show to be done with me and somebody I have known for a very long time. And most of my core group of friends I've known since elementary school through high school. So there you go. Those are people that you know for 30, 40 years right there in my age group. Unfortunately, none of them could commit. They all have families. They're at a point where, let's face it, the kids take priority. You come home from work, kids have homework, the kids have soccer practice. If you actually have time to spend with the family, you don't have time to commit to an hour, hour and a half podcast weekly. You've got to come up with content, and it seemed too daunting to them.
Mm-hmm.
Then
Totally
came,
understand.
you know the deal. Then the question came, well, I don't want to abandon this idea. Tony and I used to be coworkers, and he and I used to have conversations at work about all sorts of crazy things. He's not a comic book collector. He's a video gamer. I'm not a video gamer. I know nothing about the subject. Yet somehow we would talk about these two subjects, and then we would go on to movies, TV, music. The conversations were all over the place. And we would get an audience sometimes at our lunch table where the cool kids sit, of course. It was the cool kids table. And I thought about those conversations we had and how much fun they were and how frivolous they were, but how much other people seemed to enjoy the conversation and would pipe in. So I asked Tony if he would want to join me in this little venture. I told him we're not going to make any money at it. Well, actually, I probably lied and said maybe there was a chance we could make some money at it.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, you don't make any money at it. There are server costs. There are equipment costs, and I had to let him know that we'd split it 50-50, but there was cost involved with very little return except having a lot of fun. And he was in.
Wait. So you guys split the cost for all this stuff?
Oh, yes. At the beginning,
Wow.
so we split the server cost, the cost for the domain name, and we don't have that much equipment, trust me. But what little equipment we have purchased, we've purchased together. For instance, that's Tony's microphone across from me. This is my microphone. The soundboard, if we ever split up, I've got to chop it in half with a chainsaw because half of it is his and half of it is mine. He can have his headphones, that kind of thing.
See, I've been doing it wrong all these years.
Yeah, see, you have to find a partner to split the cost with.
Yeah.
And that's how it all started. That's the long-winded answer. I can't get any more long-winded than that.
So how
did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So two questions related to that.
Sure.
So obviously, the pop culture aspect of your show, which is and your tagline. Remind me what your tagline is for the show. It's,
you mean like what somebody could see on like Twitter or something like that? If they were looking us up.
You say something like,
oh, you mean at the beginning of the show?
Family-friendly podcast.
Yes, we are a weekly family-friendly podcast about pop culture from our point of view.
Yes.
And what that means is when we were sitting down about it and really getting serious about it, we were trying to decide what are we going to talk about on a weekly basis that some stranger might be willing to listen to. And we didn't want to just make it about comics and video games because there are plenty of shows like that out there. Again, like yours. Yours is a comic book show. What we wanted to be able to do was have the kind of conversations that we had in the lunchroom. So some days it might be about comics. Some days it might be about games. Some days it might be about something crazy. Heck, I'm surprised we haven't had more political conversations, not necessarily talking about our politics, but talking about what's been going on at the debates that we've been all been seeing for the past couple of months, because right there is entertainment, right, for you. I mean, it could be annoying and it could be frustrating, but and sometimes it's cringeworthy. I mean, some of that television is more cringeworthy than The Walking Dead. It's
Yeah.
just hard to watch sometimes, and I'm surprised we haven't brought it up more often. I guess we're afraid that maybe our real political leanings will come up, and we don't want that
Uh,
to happen.
See, I was actually going to ask you about that because I kind of thought of the debates going on in politics these days as pop culture esque, but certainly worthy of discussion.
They are, but I think if Tony, unfortunately, Tony has not been available, and that's another aspect of the show that I don't know if you want to get into, but Tony has not been available lately, which has thrown a little wrench into the works. As much as our show is so low on the totem pole in anybody's eyes, at least I feel that we have to be consistent in when we release the show. And any point where we miss a Monday, which is usually when we post the show every Monday, then we lose whatever little tiny bit of traction we have. And I don't want to lose that. So without Tony being here, I haven't had someone to even hopefully have that conversation with come up in a natural, organic way. Because what I've done is I've replaced Tony while he's been gone with guest hosts and people to interview.
Yeah, so that leads directly into what I wanted to ask you next. So,
Sure.
first of all, I'm hugely impressed with the fact that you guys put out a show every week because I certainly can't even do. I try, but I certainly can't even do every 2 weeks, which is my goal. So you doing it weekly, I bow down to you, George. That's just amazing that you can do that. But I did want to talk about or ask you about the interviews that you do because you do a lot of them, and you had George Corey on there who
Yes.
is coming out with the book is called Comic Book Fever. You've had a bunch of other people on there. And I wanted to find out. I wanted to pick your brain essentially
Sure.
to find out. How do you get these things set up? How are you networking to get all these people on the show? It's amazing that you have all these different people coming on the show every week like this.
I wish I had a playbook for you, Eric. I wish I could tell you that there's a right way and a wrong way, and I'm probably doing it the wrong way. But what I'm using is social media. In some cases where people don't have email addresses, at least none that I know of that are public, I've been trying to use private messages on Twitter or Facebook. But of course, that'll only work if somebody is a mutual friend, if someone has accepted your friend request or somebody also follows you on Twitter. So it does get a little rough. In George Corey's case, if you want to use him as an example, I think he's on episode 107. I just contacted him via Facebook, and I think I did it in a public way. It wasn't even a private message. I think I just said, I like what I see on your Facebook page. I'm excited about the book. I'd love to have you on the show. And I think I even made that contact with him sometime in the fall of last year. He got back to me and asked if I wouldn't mind. And now here's a real friendly guy for you. He asked me if I wouldn't mind postponing talking to him until closer to the release date of his book, which will be sometime at the end of June. Most people would have probably told me to, kick rocks. But here's a guy who he's selling a product. He wants to get the word out there as much as he can. He understands that, okay, any publicity is good publicity. He doesn't care if I'm NPR or I'm some little guy on the street, which is the category I'm part of. He was kind enough to get back to me and ask me if my schedule would work with his. And I mean, you can't get anybody more cordial than that.
Yeah.
And it worked out. And he was a great guy to talk to. And that is a book I've been looking forward to ever since I heard about it.
Yeah, in fact, I just put out or just recently put out something on my Instagram channel about the book because it's in previews right now, the March previews, and so that reminded me of your interview, which was really good, by the way. I really enjoyed that.
Oh, thank you. It was all him. It's all the interviewee, to be honest. Once you ask a question, you just let him go.
Yeah, but I don't know, George. I listen to quite a few podcasts where someone's interviewing someone else,
Mhm.
and I guess my taste for interviewers um, maybe is not the same as the majority of the people listening to some of these podcasts, but I really enjoy the way that you interview people as opposed to I recently went on a mini rant, if you will, on Twitter about a well-known interview podcast, and I just
Oh, yes, I
and,
read that, and you piqued my curiosity.
yeah, and so in comparison, I really enjoy the way that you interview your subjects. It's just a nice, easygoing conversation, and you keep things on task and just let things go where they may too. But I really enjoy that. So that's a really good service I think you provide those of us who are fans of your show and also of the subject matter that gets talked about.
Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it.
All right. So a couple more questions about podcasting, then we'll move on to the fun stuff. Um,
Sure.
so you and Tony got together and
Hmm.
decided to do this pop culture entertainment show.
Yes.
And so how does the Realm Network fit into this?
Very, very good question. Now, am I allowed to mention other names of other podcasts on the show?
Go right ahead.
Okay. I am a fan of a show called The Mike O'Mara Show. Mike O'Mara was part of one half of a duo called Don and Mike that used to be a very popular what they used to call hot talk show back when Howard Stern was really, really hot on the radio. I don't know how you're in Idaho, right?
Yep.
Okay, so now in Idaho, maybe in the 90s, I think that was probably about the time Howard Stern was really hitting it big. There might have been maybe an all male-oriented talk radio station that wasn't sports. Was there a station like that out there?
I'm sure there was, and there probably
Okay.
still is.
Hmm. That format seemed to be very popular throughout the 90s and maybe early 2000s. They blamed the Janet Jackson incident at the Super Bowl for being the thing that kind of put the nail in the coffin, or at least started the decline of that kind of talk radio, because everybody was afraid the FCC was going to come down on them for all the raunchy stuff that they were doing on the radio.
Oh, yes.
Mike O'Mara had a radio show after he and Don had retired. Mike carried on his show, but then his radio station that he was on here in the Washington D.C. area, which is where I am, uh, they flipped to a sports format, and he and his team got fired. I guess there's some sort of a clause in a DJ's contract that there's a no compete, and you have to kind of be radio silent for X amount of time before you can get a new gig. I don't know how all that stuff works. But somebody affiliated with his show introduced him to podcasting and suggested, why don't we take the radio show to a podcast? Once I discovered that the Mike O'Mara show was part of the podcast world, I glommed onto that. I grabbed on, and they're a daily show. Eric, you talk about doing a show once a week or once every 2 weeks. These guys put out quality content daily.
Oh God, that's my worst nightmare.
I know, right? But this is their day job. I mean, you and I mean, listen, make no mistake. I think your listeners know our day jobs. We have 9 to 5s or nine to 6s, or whatever our hours are. This isn't our job. This is our passion. This is our love. This is our hobby. What we do here for those folks, this is their job. That's why they put it out daily. They have sponsors. It sounds like a real radio show. In fact, I think they have one affiliate out in Iowa. One person who was affiliated with the show, his name was Mark Ronick. Just to let you know, he's the R in the Realm Network. I contacted Mark while he was affiliated with that show to see if he did any sort of consulting when it came to starting up a podcast. It seemed like kismet, because at the time he said, yes, in fact, we're thinking of looking for other shows to put on the network, meaning the Mike O'Mara Show network. But somewhere in the interim of my first contact with Mark and my second contact with Mark, after Tony and I ironed out what we wanted to do, Mark had left that show to start his own network with his buddy Lowell Meltzer, who is a weatherman in the Baltimore area, and a person who used to be on the Mike O'Mara Show named Buzz Burbank, who is a newsman, who has his own show, Buzz Burbank News and Comment, on the network. And they were looking for new shows to get on the network. I met with Mark. He kind of told me what I needed to do to get started. You need this kind of soundboard. I suggest you use these headphones, these microphones. He heard what Tony and I had planned. I sent him episode number 1. Oh, and he even sent an engineer here named RJ Diaz, who you hear us thank at the end of every show.
Right.
And he set us up. He's actually on the first two episodes. He was there almost like as a producer. And then we were able to kind of carry it on from there on our own. So RJ was here helping us out for those two episodes, gave us an infinite amount of knowledge, which of course I forgot totally. So if you ever wanted to know what he told me, I don't remember. But he gave us a lot of advice while he was here, and that's how we got affiliated with the Realm Network. That is the short story made ever longer.
Wow. That's amazing. So you were you were at the right place at the right time, asking the right person the right questions. That's just amazing. That George, that's I've heard a lot of people talk about their podcast origin, and I think yours is probably one of the more unique ones that I've ever heard.
I'll tell you, the timing was right because had I had I contacted Mark earlier, I don't think that the show he was previously on was ready to accept outside talent that wasn't proven. Since Mark's Realm Network was new, they were willing to take chances and risks. The Realm Network has a wide variety of topics. I mean, they've got wrestling shows, they've got cooking shows, they've got Buzz's news show. And if anything, Mark and Lowell's show, it's called the Mark and Lowell Show, those guys do what I think I originally intended to do with the high school buddies that I had in mind originally when I thought of a concept of doing a podcast, because those guys have been friends since the grade school days, and you can tell in the way they talk to each other. But now here's the thing, though, Eric. One of those guys is a weatherman in Baltimore. He already has a following, so of course people are going to listen to that show because they know him from TV.
Mm-hmm.
They're also going to listen to Buzz Burbank because from the Don and Mike days, millions of people were listening to that show and they know Buzz.
Mm-hmm.
So what's great is that there's a built-in listenership on the Realm Network, which is what Tony and I liked, hoping that we would get listeners, kind of get the residual listeners,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We nowhere do the numbers that they do, of course, but people discovered us, strangers discovered us as a result of being a part of the network. So for that, we're very, very grateful. The advice they gave us and the exposure they gave us.
Very nice. Yeah, that sounds great. I've just always been curious. I know of other essentially podcast networks, and so I was just curious how people got involved with those. So that's like I said, that's a great story. Okay, final question, George, regarding podcasting, and then we'll move into some other things.
Yeah, the fun stuff.
How do you find the time?
Mm-hmm. Good question. Well, my wife might say that I spend too much time on it. She's very patient with me.
That sounds very familiar to me too.
Uh-huh. Hi, honey. I know you're listening. No, she's very patient with me. So, but how do I find the time? So I stay up late. I don't get very much sleep. That's pretty much the long and short answer. I work the 9 to 5 day, come home and we have dinner, hang out with my wife. I try not to let it eat too much into the personal life, so that it's not always on a computer with headphones on or anything like that, although I'm probably that way from 10 o'clock on at night. I don't do a lot of internet surfing, which sounds kind of weird and counterproductive for somebody who does what he calls a pop culture show.
Yeah.
So I'm not really surfing the net too much. So it is really, if I'm on the computer, I'm doing something related to the podcast.
Well, see, I've just learned something. Don't be on the web when I'm trying to record and edit, because I get distracted all the time.
No. I wish I could tell you that I have a spreadsheet, some Excel spreadsheet that is like my daily calendar and is my Bible, my life force, and I've blocked off X amount of time per day to spend on the show. It's not like that at all. I squeeze it in, but I will say this. I try not to let it eat into my weekend, because that's definitely not fair to my wife, and it's not fair to me. Weekend days, I do not want to be anywhere near the computer or want to be doing stuff, even if it's cleaning the house, gardening, doing the normal dusting, vacuuming, whatever it is. But the weekend, I would prefer to be out hitting a museum, going to the movies, having lunch or dinner with my wife. Those are our days, and I don't want to eat into those days. It's when the day is winding down into the late hours of the evening that I'll start the podcast stuff.
Okay, so I am doing it all wrong, I see. And
I don't think so. See, I don't think there's a right or a wrong. That's the
no,
whole
there
thing.
isn't. I'm just teasing.
Yeah.
Okay, so given that you spend X amount of time during the week working on the show,
Hmm.
when do you find time to read comics?
That's a good question too. I'm woefully behind. I will admit that. I don't I in when I listen to your show and some of these other shows out there, and when I go to the comic book store, I realize I'm probably not reading as much as the average person is. And I think the only reason I keep up is trying to decipher things in previews. Uh, I will talk to the guys at the comic book store, and they will spoil something for me, which I don't mind because I have no intention of picking up the book. So I want to know what happens, so at least I'm kind of in the know. But when do I fit it in? That's a good question. Again, there's no calendar where I've blocked off the time. Well, like last night, I was catching up on a series that came out toward the end of last year from IDW called it was a Sherlock Holmes adaptation called The 7% Solution.
Hmm.
And I was enjoying reading that last night. I just decided to sit down. I wanted to read. And in the background of some of the panels, the artist had put little Easter eggs. And so I tweeted about it yesterday because I was so happy. Oh my, I noticed these Easter eggs because normally I probably read the books too fast and miss those types of things.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I just do it where I find that you discover moments in the day or the night where you can do it.
Yeah, you have to do what you can, given our busy lives, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it is a hobby. So just like anything
Yeah.
else, if a sports fan fits in watching a baseball or a football game or something like that, those are the times I fit in reading a couple of comics or a graphic novel or something like that.
Hey, so this just occurred to me, George.
Sure.
So doing the show that you do,
Hmm.
and how much time you spend doing that and preparing for it, and just reading material to maybe talk about comics
Sure.
on the show.
Hmm.
Do you find that your appreciation for the comics that you're reading is perhaps lessened or tainted in some way, since
Hmm.
you have to look at it at a differently than just as a strict reader?
I don't think so, only because I'm definitely not a reviewer. I don't want to make any sort of I don't want to misrepresent myself in any way that way. I'm not a reviewer, and I don't consider myself a critic. What Tony and I do, or what I do if I have a guest in studio, let's say, you didn't see my air quotes because this is an audio medium, but I put air quotes there. When I'm talking to somebody about this subject, it is more as a fan than being critical about it. Now, trust me, I can be as curmudgeonly as the guy telling you to get off his lawn. And in fact, that guy is probably me. And I will rant as much as I will rave, but I'm not quite sure I'm doing it in a critical way as like a Siskel and Ebert reviewing a movie. And there I just dated myself since they're not with us anymore. But uh, I, I'm doing it more as a fan, giving his opinion about what he just read. I don't know how else to say it like that. I'm not looking at it with a critical eye. I'm still looking at it with the fanboy eye.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And do you find it difficult to continue to do it that way, or is that's just your natural response to comics, and you just roll with that?
I enjoy it too much. If there's something I don't like, I I won't read it anymore since comics are serialized. If there's a story I don't like or I don't like what a character is, I'll just stop reading it because they're also very expensive these days, Eric.
Yeah.
So the money has to be allotted to something that one enjoys. And if there's something I don't enjoy, there is a plethora of other things out there just waiting for me to spend my dollars on them. And I'm happy to do it to discover something that will give me joy.
Hmm. Yeah, part of the reason I ask is because I kind of went through that myself a little bit, where I felt like the maybe doing the show and preparing for discussions about the comics on the show and all this stuff. I started to feel like maybe it was detracting from my love, yeah, detracting from my love of the medium. And so that's when I decided to basically stop doing like trying to do like weekly reviews of books and stuff instead. So instead I just focus on the things that I'm enjoying
But
reading.
again, see here, this is one of the reasons I admire you and your show, though. You are by yourself. You don't have the luxury of having a counterpart to help you go off on a tangent to take you totally off of the subject of comics to something about a song they heard on the radio or a TV show or a movie or something like that. You have to stay focused because you don't have that other person here. So me, I'm lucky. The two of us, we could be talking about something, and then by the end of the show, we realized we only really spoke about that thing for 3 minutes, got sidetracked, and and just really went down deep into the rabbit hole.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's why we don't do either thing, whether it's comics, his games, or even TV, movies, music, whatever. We don't really do anything with too critical an eye.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's a good approach, though.
I'd like to say it works for us, but I'm not sure if it's working, but we enjoy the conversations we have, and hopefully others do too.
But exactly that. It's exactly that, and that's why I like your show so much. You know, the discussion between you and Tony are just I really enjoy that, and I appreciate the conversation that you guys have, and just the camaraderie essentially of your show. So
We did have the luxury at the place where we worked together. We don't work together any longer, but there was a nice core group of people that got along very well together. And again, when I said the cool kids table, there was a table of a bunch of us who really had a good time during that lunch hour, having laughs, going out for lunch sometimes, meeting after work for a couple of drinks. I had the good fortune of working with a good group of people, and Tony was one of those guys.
all right, George, I want to jump back in time. So you mentioned
Okay.
earlier
Is there a sound
on.
effect for that? Woo!
Oh, I'm too cheap for sound effects. So you mentioned earlier on that you probably been reading for roughly 4 decades.
No doubt, and I think I've got the long boxes to prove it.
So let's talk about that. What's your secret origin story involving comic books? How did you get in?
Ooh,
How'd you get into it? What were the things that brought you into comics? The things that you first read, and basically, I want to talk about why you love comics.
sure, and I will say this about us as readers and collectors and our community, our collective community. Isn't it funny that we all? I love to ask that question also. Isn't it funny that we love to know how everybody who's into the hobby got into it?
Hmm.
I don't know why we all find that very interesting. Sometimes I was thinking about this because I knew this question was going to come up, and I was wondering if drug addicts do the same thing. Yo, man, how did you get hooked on meth? Between hits, they have these kind of conversations. I just wonder sometimes. Anyhow, not like it ever happened to me, of course. Anyway, I know I've told this story on the show. I couldn't tell you what episode, and since I'm new to your listeners, it's going to be new to them.
Yep.
If there are any of my listeners listening, they're probably not long-time listeners, so they probably never heard the story anyway.
Bear with us anyway.
Yeah. When I was a kid, my father is the youngest of seven. And when he used to go to his brother's house, who was the oldest of seven, so you can imagine there's at least that 7-year difference between them, if not more. I don't know what the difference was. When he would go over to his brother's house, he would drag me. And later on, when my brother came into existence, my brother. But because there was such an age difference between him and his older brother, there was also a great age difference between me and my cousins. So when my father would take me over to my uncle's house, of course, the adults would be upstairs doing whatever the adults were doing, but my cousins weren't around. They were at sorority parties, fraternity parties, dances, sporting events, whatever. So I was stuck by myself with all these adults. These were the days of not having multiple televisions around, and even if you had a TV, you only had the 3 stations. It would be getting late. I would be down in the basement by myself. There was nothing on TV. Again, you had very little in the way of choices, but I was very fortunate that my cousins had an army trunk full of comics that happened to be in the basement that I discovered in in my being very curious because I had nothing to do downstairs. So, of course, I'm getting myself in trouble. I'm going into a room I probably shouldn't have been in. And there is this treasure trove of comic books. And they were the kind of comic books that were perfect for a kid my age. Richie Rich, Casper, all the different incarnations of Archie comics with Jughead and Life with Archie and whatever else. Baby Huey, Little Lotta, Little Dot, all the little girls, all those comics. Millie the Model. And I went through that trunk over the course of all those years of going to my uncle's house and running to the basement. And of course, there came a point where I couldn't care less that my cousins weren't there. I could go and read some comic books. And you know how they say the first one's free? Well, that first trunk was free.
Oh, wow.
And then it just went, then I was addicted for here we are today.
Now, did you end up with any of those books that were in that trunk?
You know something? I, you know, I might have stuck a few under my shirt when leaving the house. I might have done that, but
It's all in the family. It's all good.
Yeah, that's right. I wouldn't have put it past me, but I definitely didn't inherit the trunk. I mean, if that's what you're getting at. So I don't know where that trunk full of books wound up. Then, if we want to take it a step further, my dad and another uncle of mine, when I was a kid, this is in single digit years. Now we're talking about, pre 10-year-old. My dad and another uncle owned a small grocery store. And again, this is how they talk about the good old days? These are the days where you could actually go into a convenience store like a 7-Eleven, and on the magazine rack, there were comics, or there were the old spinner racks.
That's right.
And in my dad's grocery store, while he didn't have a spinner rack, he did have some comics on the magazine rack. He didn't have that many, but I can remember seeing Richie Rich and Jackie Jokers. I could remember seeing superhero comics. In fact, one of the first comics I can recall getting is Captain America number 198. And the only reason I remember that number is because I brought it up on the show once, and I very recently saw somebody post it on the Facebook page for the magazine back issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they put it out on there because some guy put some stuff out there on the spinner racks 40 years ago. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, that was 40 years ago. There you go. Now you know how old I am. No mystery there now. But that's my origin story, I would say.
Okay, so you read, like you said, Richie Rich and
I ate that stuff up.
All what kind of what we think of as kiddie comics in a sense, for that time period anyway.
Oh, yes.
So did you then graduate to and that's not a really good term to use, but did you move on to like superhero books?
Yes. Well, what wound up happening was I did get that Captain America book I was talking about. Again, I'm not quite sure if that is really the first comic I got. I do recall around the bicentennial, again, dating myself, there were, I think DC did this more than Marvel. I know Marvel had a big treasury edition of Captain America bicentennial battles that I bought. But I think DC did a lot of, well, maybe not a lot, but had a couple of comics that had a bicentennial theme. I can remember a Superman Action Comics story where see, covers were better back then. I'm sorry, I'm a curmudgeon, back in my day, kids, that kind of thing. There was this cover where this guy, I forget what the villain's name was, punches Superman on the cover, and you can see the line in the cover, and he punches Superman so hard, he sends Superman back to colonial times during the Revolutionary War.
I remember that one.
I picked that one up. I think I picked up the second part of that story where he was already in colonial times. It took me a while. Later on, I think I bought the first part of that. But I was so excited. Here we were, the bicentennial. Superman's back in colonial times. There's George Washington. There's Ben Franklin. I couldn't get enough of stuff like that.
So which company did you gravitate towards more?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think when I was younger, it was DC.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll put it this way. In retrospect, I think DC was more acceptable to a kid because you could read a full story. If it wasn't one and done, the story was done within 2 or 3 issues.
Mm-hmm.
And while that's not what a publisher wants, as far as a kid is concerned, especially in those days when it was questionable whether or not if you saw Superman on the rack one month, would that next issue actually be on the rack next month? As a kid, I think that was appreciated, even though we didn't realize we were appreciating it. But if there was a chance that part two or the next issue wasn't going to be on the rack next month because things were sporadic and nothing was exact, the science wasn't exact. I don't know how they ordered things back then.
Mm-hmm.
At least you got a story out of it. Whereas I think the Marvel comics of the time, I don't think they were easy enough for a kid of say 9 or 10 to grasp and really fully understand. They were a little more, the universe was more developed or more cohesive. Maybe is the word I'm looking for.
Connected.
Yeah, and I don't think I appreciated that until I was in my teens.
Mm-hmm.
Although I loved the team up books. Marvel team up, Marvel 2-in-1. I
Oh,
didn't care if
yeah.
I didn't know who the character was that was teaming up with Spider-Man or the Thing. Those stories, again, mostly were one and done, few exceptions. But you could pick up a book, you got at least two superheroes in there, and in 22 pages, you had a great read and it was good fantasy, and you could kind of keep going back to it because so much had happened in there. You were happy to see Spider-Man, and oh my goodness, who is this Beast? What is this blue furry figure? I've never seen this guy before. Or hey, there's Iron Man. Oh, I've never bought an Iron Man comic before. Let me check that out. That's so cool. So,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah. What a great marketing ploy that was
Oh
for
yeah.
for both companies, because you had on DC, you had the Batman team up book and the Superman team up book around that same time. And those were all of them were great. Those are some of my favorite comics of all time, just because you got, not only do you have the major characters, starring in the book, but then you have all the guest stars coming in, and you're introduced to all these different characters from
Yep.
across their company history and their company line. So they were awesome.
And given the way comics are made today, I know there have been times where they've tried to bring back the concept of a team up book, but like you take Marvel now. I mean, back when I'm talking about, the Marvel universe was only maybe 15 years old. Now that the Marvel universe is 50 years old and everything is so interconnected, it every book you read is almost like a team up book,
Yeah, that's true.
because if you're reading Spider-Man, he's going to bump into somebody. So I guess the concept of a team up book may not survive in today's marketplace.
More's the pity.
Right. And I think that's a shame. I've talked about this on the show before, but I, if you were to ask the same question you asked of me when it came to a comic book origin story of a kid today, 20 years from now, his story is going to be a lot different than mine, and most likely a lot different than yours.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of the way there are no Richie Riches out there. There are no Caspers. Uh, there are no little Audreys. They're not there anymore. In fact, Archie, being that it's been rebooted, you just can't pick up an Archie. A kid who's 8 years old just can't pick up an Archie off the rack and read 4 or 5 page stories and a couple of gags. So a kid isn't going to say, "Oh yeah, I was introduced to comics via Archie like we were." Be very interesting for me to talk to a kid 20 years from now and say, how did you start reading comics?
I was just going to say that. Yeah, exactly. Well, I have a young kid, a young girl in my household, that is getting into comics, but her origin story is obvious, because I said, "Hey, here's some comics, you should read them," and so she
With
did.
Clockwork Orange on, or
Yeah,
you
right.
put the things in her eyes.
But fortunately, I've had several children that I've raised, and only one of the four, has shown any interest in comic books. So I'm very pleased that finally someone is into it a little bit, at least.
My nephew, who has been on the show, his name is Frankie. Shout out to Frankie. Hey, Frankie. I'm not sure if I'm the guy who got him into comics, but I know when he was younger and a birthday came along, or Christmas came along, or even when we went to go visit him, I'd have comics in hand. So I'm not sure if I had a hand in that. I know his mom is an avid reader and instilled that upon him, but I sometimes wonder if maybe I had kind of a hand in getting him to be interested in the comic book medium. I'm trying to do that with my little nephew now, but I think I'm jumping the gun a little bit. So I'm gonna have to wait till he's in grade school to. But see, that's the problem now. There is nothing like. Well, I mean, there are Angry Bird comics and things like that, but and there's something there's Owly. I think Owly has no dialogue boxes, but I I don't know. I think when it comes to sequential art and kids, it's a little difficult. I mean, maybe a Disney property like a Mickey Mouse comic or an Uncle Scrooge, maybe for a kid, maybe in early grade school. I don't even know where to start them.
Well, it's good that you bring that up because I was just thinking about what my little girl Madison reads, and it's not
Hmm.
just the stuff that I hand off to her. She's
Hmm.
actually starting to bring stuff home from the school library,
Oh, really?
and so that's the nice thing about so two things there. She's bringing stuff home from the library and introducing me to things that I've never heard of, obviously haven't read, and I'm really enjoying them, and two. The fact that the school libraries these days, elementary school libraries actually have sequential art books in on their shelves. That
Hmm.
that never happened when I was in school, for
Oh yeah,
sure.
no way. We had to sneak them in. In fact, I think I told the story on the show. We went. There was a class trip to an opera of all things with our chorus class, and one of my buddies snuck in some comics. So we're sitting there trying to read comics while the aria is going on and the fat lady's actually singing. Our chorus teacher's snoring away 2 rows ahead of us, and we're sitting there reading Star Wars comics.
Oh, nice. See, I never had the guts to actually do something like that, even though I wanted to. I was always afraid I'd get caught and they'd take my comics away. And
Oh, believe me, I was just riding on my buddy's coattails. I didn't have the guts to bring him in, but when I saw he brought him, I said, "Hey, pass me one of those, would you?"
well, yeah, I would have done that too, for sure. Uh, okay, so uh, since we were talking about DC and Marvel, I just wanted to touch
Sure.
on that a little bit more because usually when those of us who get into superhero comics, we generally start with DC or Marvel, or well, let me rephrase that. People of our age perhaps
Yes,
started with DC or Marvel because, quite frankly, that's all we had when we first got into comics.
that's true.
And until the mid to late '80s when we got some other publishers in the
Hmm.
mix. But we'd start with DC or Marvel. So who was your go-to character? Who were your favorite characters from DC or Marvel?
Oh, okay. Well, while I was reading the DC stuff, I liked the Flash. My brother really got into Batman a lot, and I'm not sure if that was. I think that was more because of the TV show, and he
Mm,
recognized the Batman, what they call now the Batman '66 show.
right.
We would watch that every day after school, so I think there was that recognition. So I would buy him Batman comics, and what I would do is I would buy the Batman comic, but kind of hand it down to him.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he had the love of Batman, and I think I had the love of the Flash. But then I eventually graduated to Marvel. And when it came to Marvel, I was lucky enough to be there for the actual print run of John Byrne's take of the Fantastic Four,
Ah.
the Claremont Byrne X-Men. And those were the things that really got me into comics.
Mm.
Uh, all the subplots and the deep behind the scenes stuff that was going on. But again, I think I had to be of a certain age to appreciate that. Had I picked up a Fantastic Four comic when I was 8, I'm not quite sure I would have gotten all the intricacies of the plot. I would have enjoyed it. In fact, I probably did read some pre-Byrne Fantastic Fours, but didn't enjoy them until later when I was older and I revisited them.
Mm-hmm.
So as I came of an age where I could understand these things, I became what I guess they called at the time a Marvel zombie. And it was make mine Marvel.
Yeah.
And all except for the new Teen Titans, which I know you're a fan of, and Crisis on Infinite Earths when it came around in 84, 85. I even had dropped out of the Flash. So when it came to DC, I think I was only reading New Teen Titans. And then when Crisis came out, that was, I couldn't eat that up enough either.
So okay, let me ask you about that then.
Yeah.
Since you piqued my curiosity.
Sure.
So here you are, you're not really reading too many DC comics.
Right. I kind of fell off that bandwagon and went
Right.
over to Marvel except maybe for Brave and the Bold and DC Comics Presents, again, because I like the team up magazines.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
But then you get into the Crisis, which is essentially killing that version of DC, the DC universe.
Hmm.
But
Well,
you,
here's
but
the
you,
thing.
but you like that.
Yeah, well, I think it was because everybody who reads comics now, and I'm guessing the majority of your audience who, reads it, uh, everybody talks about event fatigue.
Hmm.
But when Crisis came out, and even when the original Secret Wars came out, there was really nothing like that.
Oh no.
And the again, it was like the ultimate team up maxi series, right? Everybody was in it,
Yep.
and it was drawn by George Perez. I mean, how could you go wrong after, especially after seeing his Teen Titans work? How could you go wrong with George Perez drawing all the DC superheroes, and there was going to be a monumental shift? You knew it was going to happen. I mean, you didn't know how things were going to really eke out. You didn't know, there was no previews to tell you what was going to happen to the Flash or Supergirl or anybody else. How how could you not have your mind blown as a teenager who read comics when you read Crisis on Infinite Earths? It's one of those things where I had to be there. Like everybody knows where they were during the moon landing, who was alive during the moon landing. I feel fortunate that I was of the right age to appreciate Crisis on Infinite Earths and not see it in retrospect.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. In fact, you and I are, I think, cut from the same cloth, essentially, George. So, what you just said about Crisis, that's precisely how I feel about it too. So, yeah, that was pretty good.
I
Um,
remember
Go ahead.
because that ran 12 issues,
Right.
no double shipping, 12 months. I was in Florida with my grandparents for 2 of those months in the summertime. I kept every week I was running to the 7-Eleven down at the corner of their homeowners association, or whatever the little community was, checking that rack, not wanting to miss, I don't know what would have come out that summer, issues 7 and 8 or whatever it would have been. I had to have it, had to have it. Oh, and of course, this was a time with disposable income. And of course, I had to buy like 4 or 5 copies of each, right? So,
Wow.
yes, it was a speculative thing back then. Of course, of those issues, I don't think I got 4 or 5 copies of because I was at the mercy of the local convenience store, but I got them. I did get them.
Wow, I can't believe you actually bought that many copies.
I did. Well, why did I do stuff like that? Oh, well, again, okay, so hindsight, it was one of those things where, like TV back in the day, there was only ABC, NBC, and
Hmm.
CBS. You didn't have Fox, you didn't have all these cable channels. So back then, there was no reason to think that there would be the multitude of choices that we have today. So back then, if there was an issue, Wolverine was so popular back then. If Wolverine or any of the X-Men appeared in a comic, everybody was buying 4 or 5 issues of it. The Wolverine miniseries by Frank Miller.
Hmm.
People were buying that in multiple copies, just hoping that someday they'd pay their mortgage with it, which of course isn't the deal. But
So seriously, George, at that time, at the age that you were thinking in terms of investment for some of those comics?
I was thinking of, and especially again, George Perez, all the DC superheroes. It was the first real maxi series like that. And I was thinking, read one to save for all eternity, at least one to sell. I didn't do that
Ah.
for everything, but I did it for things like Secret Wars or Crisis on Infinite Earths. Definitely did it for the Wolverine miniseries. I think the first Marvel miniseries is technically Contest of Champions, and I know I did it for that one because
Hmm.
again, it was such a unique concept. I bought either 2 or 3 copies of each. I think it was only 3 issue miniseries, but again, they were what, 60, 75 cents, 50 cents, whatever they were at the time. And I didn't have a mortgage. Didn't have a girlfriend. I was too young for that. I could scrounge together 3 quarters for one issue, so maybe I could get together 9 for 3. So that's how I did it. And I don't think I was the only one.
Wow, you were a forward thinker.
I'm not so sure about that because now that I'm here in the forward, in the future, now that I'm in the future, even if I wanted to sell some of this stuff, I don't even know how to do it to even just get $1 a book
Well, the
without having
market
to
has
have a
changed so
booth.
much.
Yeah, it really has. Yeah. And unless you have a booth at a convention or you're willing to do a whole mess of shipping on eBay or something. And even on eBay, you're not going to get it. I guess you have to go to a store, and if you're lucky, you get a nickel a book or something like that. I don't know how that works.
Mhm. Yeah, but still back then, I mean, thinking like that, because I didn't even the concept of buying uh, more than one issue to
Hmm.
me, I didn't encounter that until I was years into my comic buying
Mm.
habit. So it was when I where I live there was eventually one comic book shop for the area, which is about I don't know it was about 50,000 60,000 people total in the area
Hmm.
between a couple of different cities. And so
Hmm.
we just had this one comic book shop. And eventually we got another one, but uh, that's when I found out. Oh yeah, people actually buy more than one copy of an issue. I wish I could do that, but I didn't have enough money to do it anyway.
I don't know really what I wish I could tell you what the thinking was at the time, really. I'm only taking guesses, and I'm obviously joking around a little bit, but there was a mentality about it. And it, I mean, in the 90s, I think all that speculation boomed and busted when it came to all the different types of die cut covers, hologram covers, and whatever
Mm.
else, all the other crazy things that were done that the 90s are so famous for. In the 80s, I don't know how the mindset turned from a comic just being disposable to being collectible. And I don't know how, as a teenager, I caught on to that idea. And I wasn't the only teenager in my group thinking that way. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I was following a crowd. I definitely wasn't the entrepreneur thinking about it. I definitely got the idea from someone else.
Mm,
Yeah.
very cool. Hey, so let's jump forward a little bit in time,
Sure.
and let's talk about some stuff that because you just mentioned that things that you liked back in the 80s essentially.
Yeah.
Um,
Again, dating myself.
well, that's essentially when I came into it, late 70s, early 80s. So all that stuff is all my favorite stuff, right? It's
Yeah.
all the comics that you get introduced to when you first get into the hobby. Those tend to be the ones that you love the most, and I love those Crisis and New Teen Titans and
Oh, yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So
I
yeah,
can remember, again, I don't want to be like on my show and throw you off on a tangent, but I can remember picking up off a spinner rack a Marvel 2-in-1 issue with the Thing and Sasquatch from Alpha Flight.
oh nice.
But at the time, I didn't know what Alpha Flight was.
Mm-hmm.
And here I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is a story about Bigfoot, like the mythological Bigfoot. I didn't know
Yeah.
Sasquatch was a Marvel character with a history already. I just figured the thing was meaning Bigfoot. And I picked that sucker up, and was I surprised that there was some whole long history with Sasquatch?
Yeah.
Not the story I expected, but I enjoyed it immensely, and I can
Yeah.
remember that.
George, you are making me want to go buy all those Marvel 2-in-1s and Marvel team ups and oh man, I love those. All right, like I said, let's jump forward. So those are some of your favorite books in the past. So what
Mhm.
what are you reading these days? What are your favorite books now?
Okay, I knew this question was coming up. So while I said I don't have a spreadsheet or a calendar to dictate my time, I have started a spreadsheet of what I'm reading. And I have done that for the show. I wish I had done it last year, because when we did a year-end show, it was more, what have you done for me lately? And I realized I was missing so many things that I had enjoyed earlier in the year
Yeah.
because I didn't write it down. So if something ended, which a lot of these series we read these days, they reboot, they have a new number one, I forget that I enjoyed it only through March, you know.
Yeah.
So I actually have a spreadsheet here of things that I've been reading, and I'm looking it over here. And one of the things that I really love is Grayson, which I
Yes.
know from DC Comics, which I know you love. I know you love Robin and anything that has to do with the concept of Robin.
What,
Uh,
me?
yeah, you. I listen to the show. I listen to the show. Fantastic. And I knew it would be short-lived, even if there was no rebirth or reboot in DC. And I knew I just had to enjoy it while I've got it. So for however long it goes, it's supposed to end with this DC rebirth stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately,
So
yeah.
for however much longer we have it, which isn't too much longer, I'm going to enjoy the heck out of it. I have also been enjoying, well, If we just talk about the big two, I'm not getting too much into what would be the heavy hitter books. As much as I like the Flash back in the day, and I read the Jeff Johns Flash run, when the new 52 came, I didn't get into the Flash or any of the big things. So right now from DC, the only thing I'm reading, I think, is Grayson. I'm reading some of the Vertigo titles. Are you reading things like Sheriff of Babylon also by Tom King?
Oh
Are you,
yeah.
are you reading that one? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm also I'm also enjoying Art Ops. Have you tried that one?
I got the first issue of that just because I get my comics through DCB Service, and they
Mm.
had a Vertigo bundle one month,
Hmm.
and Art Ops came with it, and so I what the heck, it was I got it was a big discount on it. I think it was like 75% off for the
I
whole.
think
If
I
I
know
get
the bundle you're talking about.
Yeah,
Was that the one with Twilight Children, Survivors
probably.
Club,
Yeah,
and Clean Room?
probably. Yeah, yeah.
All
But
right,
so
because I think
so
I did that too.
I got that first issue and
Hmm.
really enjoyed it. And then, but then it was, I missed ordering issue number two,
Uh,
probably issue number three. So what I did after I read that, I'm like, dang, I missed out. They just recently solicited the trade for that first run of Art Ops, and so I pre-ordered that. So I'm looking forward to
I
reading that.
and I hope you do enjoy it because I'm enjoying the book. It's a good book, and in fact, I wound up sticking with the other things in the bundle. See, that's how they get you.
That's right.
Uh, Luckily, Twilight Children was only 4 issues, and after those 4 issues, I still couldn't tell you what the heck happened in that book. It was beautiful,
Oh
but
yeah,
I couldn't tell you what it was about or anything.
yeah, I agree with you.
And I'm not much of a horror comic fan, but I am enjoying Clean Room and Survivors Club, so I'm going to stick with those for a little while too.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, Clean Room I'm getting, and it's a beautiful book.
Hmm.
Just
I
the
agree.
art is beautiful. The
Yeah.
story is, I'm not quite sure about the story yet myself, but I am enjoying it, and it's certainly disturbing. Gail Simone is doing some
Oh,
interesting, making some interesting choices with her storytelling in that book.
before catching up on Sherlock Holmes last night, I did read the latest issue of Clean Room last night, and you're right, it was very disturbing.
Yeah,
Very disturbing. That's why I had
yeah.
to cleanse my palate with Sherlock Holmes. The only other DC proper book, and I can't even call it proper, is the Batman 66 meets the Man from Uncle.
Okay.
I was enjoying the Batman 66 book, and I knew again that would be short lived. I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did. And they kind of followed it up with this, and I'm enjoying that. When it comes to Marvel, I am reading Doctor Strange.
Yes.
Uh, Actually, I've been out of Marvel for a while, and I've had this discussion with the guys at the comic shop, and I don't know if we're going to go off on this tangent. I know we're maybe running out of time, but I've got to admit, 10 years ago or so, when the original Civil War storyline hit Marvel Comics,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I would call my jumping off point.
Oh.
And I have not been able to get myself into the Marvel comic book universe as opposed to the cinematic universe or anything else there might be as much as I'd like. Currently, the only thing I can find myself getting into are what I'll call the outliers, like Doctor Strange. I consider Doctor Strange almost like a fringe comic. Um, the same thing with the Patsy Walker, aka Hellcat. I'm
Mm-hmm.
enjoying that book, and I'm also enjoying, believe it or not, I am enjoying Devil Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. I think that book's very fun, but then again, it's on the fringe. I,
No Squirrel Girl.
no Squirrel Girl, um, and and I like the Vision, and
Oh
I
yeah.
kind of know that whole concept of the Vision is, I knew it had to be finite. I knew even if Tom King didn't sign some sort of exclusive deal with DC, there was no way that whole Vision concept was going to go like 50 issues. I couldn't see that happening.
Oh yeah.
So
Not the way
yeah,
that the
not in the way
story
they're
is being
doing
told.
it.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So
That
I
totally
knew I'm
changes.
just embedded in this story, and when it's done, it's done. And I was surprised when I read issue one. I didn't know what to expect, and when I read it, because I'm a big Tom King fan, I just fell in love with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in it again for the long haul until it ends. But those are the only Marvel comics I'm reading. And now with Civil War 2 coming out, have to admit, not too excited.
From one Civil War to another, you're still not interested.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell you why. Rob at the comic shop, who will be on my show next week, he asked if I'm going to order Civil War 2, and I said no. And we had this whole long conversation about it. This is what comic people do, folks. You know that. You're comic people too. Uh, I it's like people discussing their sports teams. This is what we do, right? I can't explain to you why, and the only thing I can think of is the comics weren't fun to me anymore. They were a little too serious at that point.
Well, so let's see. We talked about you talked about DC and Marvel. George, what about comic publishers like Image or some other independent books?
Oh yeah, in fact, that's where I'm taking more of my risks these days. In fact,
Yeah.
they're probably getting more of my comic book dollar budget than the other guys. I mean, I'll just ramble them down. And some of them I know you've talked about on your show. I love Velvet.
Yes.
It doesn't come out often enough as far as I'm concerned. And I love Sex Criminals. Now, Sex Criminals ending, I mean, it seems like almost like they've given up on that. I don't, I don't know if you're reading it, but it's a great book, but it's now kind of coming out in trickles. And I don't know, with all the other projects the guys have, I'm wondering if that book's going to go on. I
Well,
don't even know.
and have you read the latest issue?
I have not, no. I have it,
Oh,
but I'm a little behind, which is why
okay.
I'm asking if you know if maybe it's ending or anything.
I don't, but when I read that latest issue, there is a breaking of the fourth wall
Oh, is there? Okay.
bit between the two creators,
Oh,
and it made me wonder about the future of the book.
hmm.
So it's curious that you said that.
Okay, now I can't wait to read it. Okay, good. And the thing is, I that book was coming out pretty regularly. I mean, they might have
Hmm.
after the first story arc, the way comics are these days, you know the deal. Uh, they get their story arc, they take a month or two off, I guess, to reset, and then they start season two or whatever they want to call it. After that first break, it didn't seem like the book was coming out every month anymore,
Right.
and it kind of took me out of it. And with that kind of a gap, I always had to go back and read more. So that rereading process, like you were asking me, how do I fit it in like anybody else fits in whatever hobby they have, to go and reread something I already read. And, let's face it, we're talking comics here. This is first world problem. These are first world problems here. To go back and read something I already read when I've got four other things that look fantastic and I haven't read them yet, I'm going to opt for those.
Hmm.
And now I fall a little further behind on that other series. And again, first world problems, I understand that, but that's what we comic book fans deal with, right?
Yeah.
Let's see, what else am I reading? I liked Paper Girls,
Hmm.
and when I found out that that wasn't going to come back until June, I was upset. But I have the feeling I can remember the whole Paper Girls concept and where they left off, so I think I'll be all right there.
Yeah.
I like Mystery Girl from Dark Horse. All these things are relatively new, I think, except maybe for Velvet and Sex Criminals.
Hmm.
Paper Girls only started a couple of months ago. I like the James Bond book from Dynamite. Have you tried that?
No, I've been waiting for the trade.
Okay, I'm enjoying it. I haven't read the last issue that came out, and it seems like that came out a long time ago. I wonder if that's trickling out too, or maybe the one I haven't read yet ended the story. Although I doubt it. It seems like it would take more than one issue to tie everything up. But I have enjoyed that, and I hope they keep that in, just because they released it on the back of Spectre coming out last fall.
Hmm.
I hope now they don't abandon it. Okay, I can understand they have Warren Ellis for this, and if they can't get Warren Ellis for another James Bond story, fine. But if they can tell another top-notch super secret spy story, I'm all for it.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you. I was trying to remember if Warren Ellis was the writer of that, and
Yes.
considering Warren Ellis's track record with properties, he tends to do the introductory story and then he's off to do something else. So I was going to ask if you knew if he was going to stick around on that one or not.
That I don't know. I hope he does, because the story is intriguing me and I'm enjoying it a lot. But I can understand if he was just there to have a big name to get people
Hmm.
enticed to buy a James Bond comic. I mean, we see it all the time, right? Like you just said, it's almost like his track record, and there are other writers like that, even artists too. I'm excited for the Micronauts and Rom to return to IDW. Are you? Considering that you and I seem to be of the same time period, does any of that excite you?
A little bit. I actually didn't really get into ROM or the Micronauts
Hmm.
back in the day, but I love the concepts, and I used to have in my collection a few issues of ROM, but now since gone. But so the the nostalgia aspect of it really appeals to me.
Side note, and again, I do this on my show all the time, so sorry for the tangents. When I told you that I was reading the Sherlock Holmes book and I saw all these Easter eggs in the background, the first Easter egg I saw was what the 7% solution is about. It's a team up. It's a superhero team up between Sherlock Holmes and Sigmund Freud.
Ah.
In the first panel of issue number 3, where Holmes and Freud are meeting in his office, in the background there's a bust of Rom.
Oh, no way.
And this is so of course my eye, and you can't miss it because of the way the panel is laid out. It's right there, top of panel. Your eye goes there first, kind of near a word balloon, and that opened my eyes to say, okay, I've got to look around in the background to in this office as they move around. And one of the other pictures is Freud picking up, or at least moving, a figurine of Baron Karza from the Micronauts on his desk.
Oh, geez.
And there are some other references in there too, but I thought that was kind of funny that they threw that in there to, I guess, whet people's appetite.
I love it when artists do that.
Yeah. In fact, are you reading Mystery Girl from Dark Horse?
Nope. I while I was intrigued about it, I decided to wait on that one too.
Well, the artist on that, I know his last name is Albuquerque. His first name escapes me. He is the same artist on Letter 44 from Oni Press. And he, at least in issue 1 and issue 3, I noticed that he has the Letter 44 logo as a patch on like somebody's baseball cap or somebody's jacket. And it makes me want to go back to issue 2 and see, where did I miss the Letter 44 reference? And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I had Rich from the local comic store on the show, and he's a big Letter 44 fan. He has a patch of the logo on his sweatshirt. And I showed him the reference in issue number 1, and he was so excited because he enjoys the book so much. And now he's looking for those little Easter eggs also. It's fun when the artists do that.
We love our Easter eggs, don't we?
Yes, we do. I'll tell you about 2 more that I haven't started yet because they started around Christmas time, and I really didn't give myself too much reading time around the holidays. Klaus, which is the story about Santa Claus by Grant Morrison.
Right.
And Humbug, which is from, I think it's 451 Fahrenheit. I think that's the name of the publisher. Miniseries, all holiday related, that started around the holidays. But the thing is, Klaus, I think, goes 8 issues. So what is that going to end sometime in June?
Mm-hmm.
And Humbug, maybe 4 or 5. So that'll end either this month or next month. Way past the holidays, but they're holiday themed. And I thought that was kind of funny that they didn't release them as, say, one big graphic novel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I can see how interest would wane as time went on.
Exactly.
But the Humbug, the Humbug concept, the conceit is Ebenezer Scrooge is a paranormal investigator wanting to trap ghosts, a la Ghostbusters.
That's right. I was trying to remember that one. Yeah. I looked at that too and thought that sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, but buying Humbug or Klaus in March or April, especially now, the weather's getting better. I can understand why people would almost like glance over it in their local comic shop, even if they were reading it, you know? So I don't know if that was a good marketing ploy. We'll have to see.
Well, again, Klaus was one of those projects. You know, it's Grant Morrison, and he's one of my favorite writers. So while I decided not to get the monthly book, I was gonna pick up the trade when it finally came out. And now that you're would you say you're recommending Humbug as a good read, as a good comic?
In both those cases, well, let me put it this way: in both those cases, I only read the first issue of each. And it did want me coming back for more. So if that's, I'm not sure if that's an enthusiastic vote of confidence. But if any book or TV show or soap opera or whatever wants you to come back for that second episode, I think it succeeded in doing what it was supposed to do and tell a good story.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well then I will definitely keep an eye out for the Humbug trade if they ever get one out. Yeah,
hopefully. Who knows? And like you say, sometimes if they don't meet their deadline and their schedule, a book that should have ended in June may not end until September. So,
well, and we may get the trade next holiday season.
Holidays, right? Yeah, maybe that's their marketing master.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And those are the ones kind of at the top of my list. I experiment here and there with some other ones, but right now that's what I'm reading pretty much.
Okay. All right. I have one more
Sure.
comic book related question for you, George, and then
Phew,
if
phew,
if
phew,
you
the
if
hot
you
seat.
if you don't have to go right away, we can maybe extend the conversation about some other comic book
Sure.
related stuff, but pop culture,
That's
more
fine.
more
Whatever
pop
you have
culture
time
stuff.
for and whatever
Okay.
your listeners can handle.
All right. So okay, um, this is a big one though, George.
All right, I'm ready.
Why comics? What about comic books? What about that genre? What about the medium appeals to you? Why do you love it so much? Why do you now, 40 something years later,
Right.
can
Why
continue?
do I have railroad tracks along my arms now because of comic books? Is that what you're
Exactly.
really asking? Is that what it
Exactly.
is? Why I inject the latest issue of Plutona right into my toe? Is that really what you're trying to ask me?
Ooh, ooh.
Yeah, ouch. Just saying it made me cringe. I think now I think we all as comic readers and collectors have to dig deep inside. And I think the thing that brings us back month after month and makes us so passionate is the thing that those who don't engage in the hobby can never understand and make fun of us about. And that's the fact that you can sit down and you can read a 22-page book, a 40-page book, even if it's an original graphic novel with 100 pages. You can lose yourself in that world for a relatively short period of time and get so much out of that piece of material for as much as we complain how much these things cost. Relatively speaking, the entertainment value is priceless. And the time commitment, for as much as I was telling you about my first world problems about having time to actually sit down and read a comic, people who don't read comics are going boo hoo, how long does it take to read the comic? But and that's the funny thing that they'll never understand. Sure, it may only take me 15 minutes to read a book. Heck, some avid readers probably barrel through certain books these days because they're not very text and prose heavy. They could barrel through them in like 5 minutes. Me, maybe I take 15, 20 because I'm looking at the art, trying to find those Easter eggs or appreciating the artwork. But then I can move on to something else.
Hmm.
I can ingest so much, so much fantasy, so many different worlds in a relatively short period of time. And those worlds are very well developed, thanks to not only the writer, but the artist. Because when I sit down and I read a prose fiction, nonfiction book, well, let's say a fiction book, because most fiction books are the ones that are trying to set a scene. Nothing against, nothing against a prose book. Believe me, I read plenty of prose books too, just like the rest of us do. But there's something about having that picture in front of you to tell the tale that I think is the key. I mean, that's what sequential art is. And that's the key to why I think we all love it so much and why some people can't understand why we love it so much, why they're still funny books. If my grandfather was still alive today, he'd he'd go crazy with me saying, "You're still reading those funny books?"
Hmm.
And my wife will never pick up a comic. I almost got her to read The Fifth Beatle, the Brian Epstein story by Vivek J. Tiwari. He was on the show
Hmm.
back in December. And after hearing the interview with him, she almost took the book from me and read it. Almost, mind you, almost. She'll never read a comic. She'll never understand, and there are plenty of people who will never understand. And there are some people who used to read them, like some of my buddies back in high school, that'll never pick them up again. They feel they're juvenile. They feel they're beneath them,
Hmm.
and they don't understand how I can enjoy them and go to comic conventions and and actually still talk about them the way I do, like I'm doing right now. That's what I love about them. I love the fact that I can read one in 5 to 10 minutes if I want. I can take a half hour to totally dissect it if I want to. I can move from one world, one universe to the next. And especially now with all these independent titles out there, each book is its own little universe. So within a month, if I buy 10 books, I have 10, potentially 10 separate universes, 10 separate stories. I can't get that in that same time frame watching a TV show, watching a movie, reading a book. Uh, there's no other entertainment medium that I feel does the same thing for me and gives me as much pleasure. I'm not quite sure if that was an answer to the question, but that's what they just give me so much pleasure. And to this day, I'll admit I'm a little surprised that to this day they give me as much pleasure as they do.
Wow. Well said, George.
Was
Well
that
put.
impassioned or what?
That was awesome.
You would have thought I had a script in front of me as I said.
Wow. I could not have done any better at all. So thank you. That was a good answer. Very good answer.
Thanks. Meanwhile, some of your listeners are going, God, how jive was that?
All right.
Mind you, I'm sitting in a room surrounded by comics and trade paperbacks and all sorts of fun stuff in here. So as I'm talking and I'm trying to explain why I love this stuff, I'm looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to put into words, why do I enjoy everything on this bookshelf over here? Why do I enjoy everything in these boxes? Why did I go to the comic book store today and buy 4 more books? Why? It's just because it gives me so much pleasure. Just like going to a baseball season's coming up now. There are some people who just can't wait for those 162 games in a season or something like that. They just can't wait to hit the ballpark, and they look forward to this time of year, and they're going to hit as many games as they can and watch it on TV as much as they can. Well, that's how I feel about comics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have more in common with non-comic book readers than either side perhaps realizes or is willing to admit sometimes.
Right. And unfortunately, those who don't participate, and I would say the same of people who aren't sports fans, take the football widow, the traditional stereotypical football widow. My brother's wife is a football widow. That person cannot understand why the other person can't do anything else on a Sunday in the fall but watch all these football games. they can't wrap their mind around it, and they probably make fun of them. Yeah. Just like some people will never understand why you, me, your listeners, why we love comics so much. And again, they'll probably make fun of what they don't understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we've put up with that for most of our lives, probably.
Yeah, pretty much.
I exaggerate, of course. I didn't have like the stereotypical people browbeating me or bullying me because I was a comic book fan and all that kind of stuff. But I have encountered people who, adults who look at me and go, you when they find out you read comic books. However, this is a great segue, George. If we can just go right into it.
Yeah, let's do
it. Yet we live in a day and age now where comic book characters are on our screens, our big and our small screens, almost daily, definitely monthly, and year after year, with all the movies, the TV shows that are going on right now. It just, I think of this, George, as this is a golden age of comic bookdom, in the sense that we have all this exposure, all this attention on the stuff that's on those screens that have come from our comic books, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what is it? Do you watch the TV shows? Do you go to the movies, or do you just kind of ignore that kind of stuff?
I do. I didn't get into for the current crop of TV shows. I didn't get into Arrow because I wasn't in the mood for the darkness that it looked like it contained. From what I understand, when it first started, it was pretty dark, but now it's kind of lightened up a bit thanks to the success of The Flash. I love The Flash show. I think that is a great TV show. And in turn, I also like the Supergirl show that's on CBS right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to confirm it with the guy with Rob at the comic shop today. I thought it was all some sort of a fan ploy on social media. I didn't realize that it was true that there was going to be a Supergirl Flash episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that it's at the end of the month. Is it at the end of this month or is it a May thing? I thought it was
Uh,
at the end of March.
I don't know,
Okay, but
actually.
now I'm really excited. I mean, two shows that I love somehow found a way to combine cross network. Love
Hmm.
it. I can't
Hmm.
wait. Are you watching any of those three?
You know, when I ask you about, you know, how do you find the time to do all the stuff that
Hmm.
you're doing? Yeah, this is my tangent. um, I don't have I find I don't have the time to keep up with all these shows. I did watch all of the first season of The Flash.
Hmm.
I tried to watch Arrow and I just couldn't get into it. Even though I have one of my very best friends from years and years ago, he's a huge Green Arrow fan, and he really enjoys that show, and he's tried to get me to get into it, but I tried and I couldn't do it. But we have, not in Supergirl. I have watched the first episode. I liked it, but it's a show that I want to watch with my girls,
Mm.
and finding the time to sit down, because we get home from work, they got to do homework. Yeah, I'm making dinner, and the next thing you know, it's bedtime, and so there are rare days when we can actually sit down and watch stuff at night, and our weekends are filled with other activities too. So it's really difficult for me to sit down and watch that show or any shows really. But so not only do you have those three shows, you got I'm gonna try and name these off the top of my head. We got Gotham,
Hmm.
iZombie,
Hmm.
Lucifer is on Fox now. Of course, you got the Marvel shows, Agents of Shield. I'm forgetting something.
Agent
Uh,
Carter.
Agent Carter, thank you. I love
Hmm.
that show. I have the entire second season yet to watch. I'm definitely gonna watch that. You have all the Netflix shows, Jessica Jones and Daredevil, and what Luke Cage is coming out, I think, later this year. There's just so much stuff, and I feel like I'm betraying something, myself, my I don't know, my medium, my I don't know. I feel like I'm betraying something because I'm not watching this stuff. I'm not keeping up with it.
You don't beat yourself up over again another first world problem.
Right.
But I gave Gotham a shot. Here's a perfect example. I didn't even give an Arrow a shot, but I did give Gotham a shot. And Gotham wasn't my cup of tea. I stuck with
Yeah.
it for a while. And here's where programming benefits the networks and works to their disadvantage.
Hmm.
Just as much as a corporate-wide event might boost sales, but for this collector right here, this reader, sometimes serves as the jumping off point. Do you know how TV shows these days have the midwinter break?
Hmm.
I took that as an opportunity to get off of Gotham in the
Ah,
first season.
yeah.
Had that break not occurred, believe it or not, I might have stuck with it almost out of a false sense of obligation.
Hmm.
So I'm almost happy for the break. However, because of the break, I am woefully behind on Supergirl and Flash, two shows that I adore. It was hard for me, like you said, to find the time to get back into the swing of Monday night or at least even recording. Heck, I even forgot to record, even though you could set your DVR to record new episodes. I I forgot and didn't record when the shows returned after their midwinter break. Uh, there have been times where shows have been on my DVR for so long that they take up so much space that as a concession so that my wife can tape what she wants to tape, or if we want to tape a couple of movies, it's not like the days where you would have a videotape, you just tape it, take it out, and you can have a new videotape. You only have X amount of space on your DVR. Knowing that I can get some of these things online, whether it be free or later I'll have to pay for it when it's on demand or something, I've made the concession that let's get rid of these things off of the DVR, which contributes to being woefully behind. And since these shows are serialized, there's no point in watching this week's if I'm 4 episodes behind,
Right.
which gets you further and further behind, which of course people in third world nations are laughing at us because they can't eat.
Right.
right?
Wow.
So
Way to bring the show down, George.
yeah, well, there you go. Well, I'm just trying to put things in perspective because
Yes.
I know
Yeah.
some people really lament over this stuff, and I know I do too. But then I have to put it in perspective,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and that's why I don't mind that I erased a couple of things off my DVR, knowing that eventually someday I will be able to watch it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a nice thing too. You mentioned the streaming and stuff. We can
Yeah,
go back to it. I mean, even if we have to, it's funny to say the DVD sets; those are even old school now, I think.
right.
But we have that opportunity now. Whereas I think when we were kids, there was something on TV that we may have loved, but if unless it was in syndication,
Mm.
and your local TV station decided to air it, you didn't see that again ever
Right. Yes.
until 30, 40 years later, and when they release everything essentially.
Right. When it's nostalgia for you at that point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
What about we got some major movies coming, and one
Oh, yeah.
that just came out not too long ago. Speaking of the what is it, the phenomenon. That's the word I'm looking for. That was Deadpool. Did you happen to watch that, George?
I did. I enjoyed it. I was surprised I enjoyed it as much as I did, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me too.
Hmm.
Did you read Deadpool comics at all?
No, and in fact, I loathe the character, and I think I loathe the character. I think I loathe the character because of the overexposure. It's almost
Mm,
like the way there was a point when Wolverine was
right.
overexposed. Actually, Wolverine was probably overexposed for like 20 years,
Mm,
but even the Punisher was a little overexposed in the 90s. Um, you could take a lot of characters and say they were victims of being overexposed to cash in on their popularity. I think Deadpool is one of them. And with all the reboots, rebrands, new number ones and stuff, even if I wanted to get into Deadpool, I wouldn't even know where to start.
mm-hmm.
There's no sequential numbering at all. There's no, and I know it doesn't matter really when there's no convoluted history so much as with other characters. You could probably jump on whenever you want with Deadpool, but just not my cup of tea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mm.
same. But the
And when
movie
it
was
comes,
pretty good though.
yeah, and the thing where I had my reservations was I really don't like violence in my movies. I
Mm-hmm.
know that sounds a little hypocritical considering there are a lot of superhero battles and things of that nature in comics to begin with, but I just don't like seeing the blood and the gore and stuff. And seeing that it was rated R actually was almost a turn off for me, even
Mm-hmm.
though it being rated R seems to be making the movie industry salivate that, oh my, we have a new audience now if we make certain things rated R, which
Right.
some things maybe should be because that's the kind of story that's being told. Deadpool should be rated R because that's the kind of character he is, and those are the stories that are being told.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I just had I don't mind the bad language. I don't mind the sex. It's the violence.
Mm-hmm.
Those are your three taboos when it comes to the kids, right? You got your language, you got your sex, you got your violence. And as Meatloaf said, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I I could deal with the language, I could deal with the sex, I can't deal with the violence. I always laugh. I've got a few friends that they can deal with that violence. They can deal with the blood, the gore, they can deal with it being very graphic. But if somebody drops an F-bomb, or if somebody is naked or even close to being naked, or there's a sex scene that looks pretty real, they get offended.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, meanwhile, people's brains are being blown out of their head. You're seeing their guts fall out of their body, but you're okay with that. But
Yeah.
somebody said a bad word, and I'm not talking about because their kids are with them. I'm just talking about they themselves are personally offended. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't understand that. I'm more personally offended by seeing body parts being splattered on the screen.
And normally I would agree with you on that, George, but for some reason I think maybe just the comedy of it,
Yeah, right.
the
That's
the,
true.
the the over the top nature of
Hmm.
it kind of lessened that aspect for me.
I agree.
But I have to say my wife did not like that part at all. And
Oh,
she
really?
she's not a comic reader either, like
Hmm.
yours.
Hmm.
I've tried to get her to read things over the years, and the only thing that I've successfully, and it wasn't even me really, it was just the fact that I went to the comic book shop that I used to go to, and it was a recommendation by one of the people there that worked there. And she's only read in its entirety Bone by
Oh,
Jeff Smith.
and there's the nice gateway drug
Yeah.
into the hobby.
Well, and I thought so with her, but she's not really expanded beyond that. So, but
Hmm.
I keep working on her. But but anyway, she's not big on the blood and gore in some movies either. And when that opening scene of Deadpool on the freeway there, uh,
Hmm.
she she got turned off and it kind of went downhill from there.
I am surprised that my wife is enjoying the superhero movies overall very much. And it started with the Iron Man movie back in what, 2008 or whenever it was. When I went to go see Iron Man and I came out of that was the first superhero movie, even after all the X-Men and Spider-Man movies. That was the first one I came out of. And I said to myself, I really think my wife would enjoy this. Let me throw it at her
Mhm.
as a thing. And she took the bait, for lack of a better term, and she enjoyed it. And then after that, she's just been going with me whenever these Marvel movies have come out.
Mm.
And Deadpool, it's funny because with my complaints about the violence and my reservations about it, she was the one who said, "Listen, I don't care if you stay home. I'll go with the girls. I'll go with the ladies at work. I'm going to see Deadpool because you want to know something? That's her sense of humor.
Ah.
The snide comments, the remarks, the snarkiness, right up her alley, and it didn't disappoint her as much as as much as it surprised me. It didn't disappoint her.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's cool. Yeah,
yeah,
my
we had a
wife
good time.
my wife likes to go to the well, I don't is that true? Does she like to go? She likes to go to movies,
Uh-huh.
and she likes me to some degree. And so she knows I'm going to go to those movies, so she likes to spend time with me, so she goes. I know that she enjoys some of them. She mostly enjoys the Marvel ones, specifically Iron Man. Robert
Hmm.
Downey Jr.
Yeah.
is a hell of an actor in that role. So she really enjoys that. She's not looking forward to, speaking of a movie that's coming up here really soon,
Yeah.
the next Captain America movie,
Mm.
because she doesn't want to see Tony and Cap fight each other.
Yeah.
She loves them both, and she doesn't want to see them fighting.
I think that might have been what took me out of the Marvel universe back when Civil War was a comic book
Hmm.
10 years or so ago, because down in my core, I probably feel the same way. Okay, you can have the usual misunderstanding that was key in a Spider-Man comic or a Marvel team-up comic. There was always, again, the Marvel universe at the time I'm talking about was relatively new. So if Spider-Man met Daredevil for the first time and there was a misunderstanding and they fought each other for 5 pages, the misunderstanding was usually resolved and then they went and they fought the bad guy. Here, at least in the comic books, it seemed like that strain, maybe even to this day, has never really gone away.
Hmm.
When it comes to the movie, I don't know how it's going to play out. Obviously, it's going to be different, but I mean the plot will be different. But what will this mean for the franchise? And will you come away from the movie with a warm fuzzy, or will you be disappointed as a fan, going, that rift between them, man, that's disappointing.
Yeah.
It might be a good movie, it might be very entertaining, but will it leave a sour taste in our mouths as fans?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a
Yeah.
little concerned about yeah, exactly that. The kind of like they seem to be going for a Marvel movie, a
Mm.
bit darker in
Yeah.
tone, which I don't mind as a fan, as someone who likes stories that are perhaps a bit darker in tone. But it does make me curious what comes next.
Hmm.
Even though I'm really looking forward to. Let me preface this by saying, and I know a lot of people will take me to task on this. I was
Oh.
not a big fan of the last two Captain America movies,
Uh-huh.
especially the second one. And I know a lot of people in my circle love that last Captain America movie, and I was
I
like,
have to admit, I'm in that camp also, but I'm not
yeah.
gonna, I'm not gonna yell at you or anything.
it,
It's your
it-
show.
I enjoyed it. It was okay,
Mhm.
but I'm really, really looking forward to seeing Civil War.
I can't say that I'm not excited to see it either. I'm just nervous
Hmm.
about how the story's going to go. But let's face it, man, ever since we were kids, isn't this really? I mean, for as much as we said the Avengers movie is what we all wished for, to see the superheroes that are going to be in this movie, isn't that what we've always wished for?
Oh yeah,
To see all those characters on the screen on a live action screen together and
yeah.
done well.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Hmm. Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man. So you mentioned that earlier.
Yes, yes.
So we
In
have
our,
that we have
our
that bit.
pre-meeting, our pre-meeting.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, we have so the latest trailer for Captain America: Civil War that just
Yes.
came out, I think today as we record this,
Mm-hmm.
features a
Did it really
little.
come out today?
I maybe it was yesterday.
Okay, but still, I didn't realize it was that new. Usually, I'm way behind the curve on
I
this.
you know I probably am wrong about that, but but
No, you're probably right.
but we have at the very end of it a certain Marvel superhero shows up and
Do we need to make a spoiler here? Well, I mean, this is no surprise, right?
well, it's a trailer, so I
That's
figure
right.
people are going to see it or not, whatever. But so Spider-Man shows up, because Marvel films or what is Marvel whatever the Marvel movie production company thing is called.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're just Marvel, right? Marvel
Is it?
Entertainment now.
Yeah, Marvel Entertainment. Yeah. So,
Hmm.
but they made a deal with was it who owns Spider-Man? Sony?
Is it Fox?
I thought it was Sony.
Is it Sony and then Fox has the X-Men franchise?
Yes,
Is
yes,
that how that
yes.
goes? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
But they made a deal with the other movie company, and so now Spider-Man gets to show up in the Marvel movies, the proper Marvel movies. So, but yeah, to see these characters, like you said, are just I can't believe it. So, like I said, this to me is like the golden age
Oh yeah,
of superhero slash comic book entertainment.
I agree.
It's just amazing that I as a kid growing up thinking how cool it would be to see an Avengers movie or a Justice League movie or whatever movie, and here I am nearly 40 years later and I'm getting my wish. I
Yep.
get to see this stuff. And unfortunately, like I said, with the TV stuff at least, I'm not I'm not enjoying it as much as I wish I could just because of time,
Right.
not because of desire, just because of time. But the movies, it's really easy to spend 2.5 hours on a weekend afternoon to go see a movie as opposed to spending an hour a week for, however many weeks it is watching a TV show. So, like I said, first world problems though.
I know, right? But we are, for as much as I might be sounding again curmudgeonly, I am looking forward to the Civil War movie. And believe it or not, I am looking forward to Batman versus Superman
Yeah.
coming out at the end of this month. Uh, I don't know how you felt about Man of Steel. I didn't like it too much, and I was very disappointed that I didn't like it as much as I thought I should have.
Yeah, essentially, I wish I would have liked it more. Uh, and I did like most of the movie for the most part. It was the basically the battle scene towards the end of the movie that lost me.
Yeah.
A lot of people have complained about that, I think we have a good point, but at the same time, there was a lot of good stuff in that movie, and Superman's one of my favorite DC characters. So to see him on the big screen, rebooted like they did, I actually did enjoy it quite a bit. I have to say, when they came out at what was this, the San Diego Comic-Con, 2 years ago,
Hmm.
and did that announcement, that kind of pre-announcement, I guess, in a way, when they just had the logo and
Cool.
they had the guy who played one of the generals, I think, or a major in Man of Steel come out and read that little blurb from The Dark Knight Returns,
Mm.
and everybody goes wild in Hall H. I thought, part of me was like, oh yeah, that's going to be cool, but then most of me was like, really, they're gonna do the Dark Knight Returns, Batman versus Superman thing, because that's really my least favorite part of that comic book series.
Yeah, I would agree with you there too. I'm
I
right on the same page with you.
call me Pollyanna, but I love it when those guys work together. They don't have to agree with 100% with each other, but they're better as a team as opposed to being adversaries. And I know that they're eventually going to get to that. I'm just concerned that most of the movie is going to be that.
Right. And I don't know what it is about the DC Trinity these days, but somehow I'm just more excited about Wonder Woman. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I really don't know why.
The look that they've come up with her I think is fantastic.
I do too.
not to take anything away from Linda Carter's Wonder Woman, from our childhood, she was something else. She was a
Yep,
wonder.
you're not kidding. My co-host Tony would agree with you 100%, 110%.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this, though. You and I talked about this briefly in our pre-show meeting. How great would it have been if we had no idea? We could have heard the rumors, which is fine. But what if we had no idea that Wonder Woman was going to be in that movie, or Spider-Man was 100% going to be in the Captain America movie?
Right.
And we're sitting there in the movie theater, and an hour in, or whatever it is, we see that character pop up on screen for the first time in the movie, and thereby it being the first time for us as the viewer.
Yeah.
How great would that be?
Yeah.
In today's age, it's a shame that, you know what? I hope I'm proven wrong. I'm hoping there's some surprise in one of these movies that totally takes us and throws us for a loop. I don't think it's possible in today's digital age and everything being tweeted out the moment it happens. But how cool would it have been that last scene in the trailer you and I were talking about? What if the first time everybody saw that scene was right there in the movie theater and their jaws could drop and the popcorn falls to the floor?
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's the same thing with not just Wonder Woman in the Batman versus Superman movie, but a lot of people were talking about the reveal of the Doomsday character as well. So what else can they have in this movie? So
right.
Yeah, and it's not just the movies or the TV series. They do it in the comics too, where they have to announce the big thing, months in advance. And I realize that they're trying to drum up sales and get people to pre-order, and I totally get that. But at the same time, is how much do they have to reveal? Why can't they just let it develop, in real time, essentially, with the readers, with the viewers? I totally agree with you, George. I don't know.
Your show, that you don't do it on your show. I mean, the word in your title, review, basically implies that the product has already come out for public consumption and you are talking about it. But there are other podcasts, news outlets, no matter what the genre, that thrive on what I'll call the spoiler, for lack of a better term. They've just got to be out there and get the news first that this is happening. Look at this picture, and then there are plenty of podcasts out there that jump on it. They'll warn you that there's a spoiler, but they thrive on getting the news first. Breaking the news. You've got to know this. You've got to see that. Well, you know what? How about we see it when it was meant to be seen?
Yeah. You got to get those clicks these days.
Exactly. Yes. It's a shame, but that's the world we live in. And again, first world and second world problems.
That's right.
Well, actually, since we're talking about comic books, I guess we should say fourth world problems, right? In honor of Jack Kirby, right? Fourth world problems.
There you go.
Why didn't I say that an hour or so ago?
Oh my gosh. George, is there any other pop culture related stuff that you would like to bring up?
No, you know what? We hit on all the points that I thought we would hit on tonight, and then some. And we have talked the listener's ear off long enough, so I'm fine. We've spoken about enough tonight.
We have, and I've kept you for a couple hours here, and I know it's getting late on the East Coast there where you're at.
Don't worry about it. You know something, Eric? I will talk to you any day of the week, even if it's not to be recorded, because I don't have too many people to talk comics with. Like I said, even my co-host really doesn't care about them. So when we're on the show, it's usually a one-sided conversation unless there's a guest. So I will talk to you any day of the week, Eric.
Excellent. I feel the same way, George. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you so much for coming on and
thanks
and talking comics with me.
It was fun to be here.
It's always nice to, like you were talking about earlier. I mostly do a solo podcast now, but I so miss talking to someone about this stuff. So I need to do more of that with you, my good friend Travis, and other people. So we'll see how the rest of this year goes for that. George, why don't you take us out and tell people again about your show and where they can find it, and we'll say our goodbyes.
Oh, thank you. I am one half of the George and Tony Entertainment Show. I'm the George part, And we can be found on iTunes. Please subscribe. We love to have new subscribers. We can be also found on, you can follow us on Facebook at George and Tony Entertainment, and we're also on Twitter at George and Tony. You can hear the show besides on iTunes. You can hear us at realmnetwork.com, or you can go straight to our page on the Realm Network site at georgeandtony.com. And we're also on SoundCloud and georgeandtony.libsyn.com. And again, in the absence of a forum, please feel free to leave us comments on our Facebook. Comics. You can leave us comments whenever you want, but you can leave us comments. That might be hard to do on Facebook. Leave us comments on Facebook. We love to hear from you. And in fact, if you're going to listen to our show for the first time as a result of my discussion with Eric tonight here on Long Box Review, please let us know, because we would love to say hello to you on what we will say the air.
You're so good at that, George.
What do you mean?
Your information blurb.
And again, you'd think I really don't have it written down. I'm just making a joke here. You'd think I'd have it written down. You know what? I've said it so many times on the show that it comes natural. I'm at work some days, and they call me in the meeting, and I let out the spiel, and I get a weird look from everybody as they're drinking their coffee. Then I have to explain what a podcast is. You know the deal. There are so many people out there that don't know what a podcast is. I can't believe that. And they're technical people. I'm not talking about somebody in their 90s. I'm talking about someone in their 20s or 30s that that should be in the know. Maybe they're not IT people, but they should be in the know and know what a podcast is. I mean, I feel like I was late to the party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
All right. So here, I'll do my spiel. Since we're at the end of the show, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you really enjoyed the conversation that George and I had. I certainly loved it. This was a lot of fun. I hope we can do it again sometime, George.
Thank you. Me too. As long as the listeners can bear it, I will be back anytime you want.
Excellent. So if people, besides going on and leaving comments at the various places that George just cited, you can also leave comments about this episode at longboxreview.com. You can also email me if that is your preference at longboxreview@gmail.com. Or you can always just hit me up on Twitter at Longbox Review. That's really where I spend a lot of my online time anyway, perusing the things that are out there in the Twitterverse. So I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear how you felt about this episode, what you liked about it, and if you had any other comments about the things that George and I discussed. So with that, thank you again, George, and thanks for listening, everybody.